Hi, and welcome to this week's edition of Newsmakers TV, on the air since 2014 as Santa Barbara's most popular and provocative local news program, featuring analysis and commentary from our top local journalists. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, May 12th, 2023, and I'm very pleased to welcome back two great colleagues and good friends, Nick Welsh, executive editor and award-winning columnist for the Santa Barbara Independent, and Josh Molina, political reporter, journalism educator, and host of the Santa Barbara Talks podcast. Thanks, fellas, for coming. Lots to talk about this week. The sale of Sansum Clinic Healthcare, the latest political embarrassment for Doss Williams, tiny homes in Goleta, breaking news from SBCC, SBPD, and SBUSD. But let's start with a City Hall story that triggered the most robust and vigorous reporting and writing from you two. Development of a 19-unit apartment building at 425 Santa Barbara Street. Josh, as a policy matter, why was this such a big deal?
Well, there was an appeal of a 19-unit housing project, and it really emphasized this whole debate over more housing versus sort of the impacts those housing have on a community in terms of parking. This project was approved with zero parking, and that's the wave of the future, at least from the state of California, which is allowing developers to build housing projects without a single space for parking if they're within a half mile of public transit. And so that is the debate that is going on, is can you really build a market rate housing project and expect people to not have cars? Or are people going to have cars, flood the streets, park in the streets, and further complicate areas? So this meeting was this colossal matchup between attorney Barry Cappello as well as developer Ed St. George, along with planner Jarrett Gorwin, who's also formidable in his own right. And they're talking about an appeal, but what they're really talking is about the past, the history of Santa Barbara, the present, and most importantly, where are we headed and what kind of a community are we going to be in? And I know Nick wrote about this, so he can take over, but this was high theater, courtroom drama, Barry Cappello at his best. And what I mean by at his best, I mean just all out aggressive energy in those little city council chambers. And it prompted a request for an apology from council member Sneddon. It was dynamic theater, but make no mistake about it, the issue is really important.
Yeah. Well, all three of us have had the very great pleasure of being on the other end of Barry Cappello's style. Nick, you went full poodle on this. Your lead is those expecting the city council showdown between Uber landlord and developer Ed St. George and Uber Barracuda attorney Barry Cappello to be akin to that of Godzilla and King Kong were sorely disappointed when the dust settled late Tuesday afternoon. The outcome more resembled a battle between Godzilla and Bambi, with Cappello cast in the role of Bambi. The council voted 5-1 against Cappello. Tough words for Barry. What did you think was at stake there, and how did he do?
He did it as well as he possibly could have, and I think that there was some meat left on the bone, perhaps. But I think what Josh said was right on target. That this is really, I mean, you had like these two uber, alpha males going up against each other. Now, what sort of diminishes that conceit is the fact that Ed St. George wasn't in the chambers, his representative was. And so it really didn't materialize quite the way I had hoped. But underlying the sort of, testosterone clash is a really, we all understand that way too much real estate is set aside for the car and parking. And when you're in a housing crisis, it makes total sense. How do we minimize the use of space for parking? And so here's Ed St. George, as usual, giving people what they want but maybe just a little bit more than that. And so it's 100% no parking. And this is sort of the first thing, the first one of these we've seen. And so one of the issues that Barry Cappello raised very convincingly was, okay, how are people supposed to get around? Are they supposed to take the bus? Oh, guess what? The bus, you get one, once an hour, there's bus service around here. And you only go on, there's only one line, so you can only go in one direction. Well, that's not super helpful. Are people supposed to ride bikes? Well, they are creating space here for e-bike storage, so that probably will be a real way. It used to be people would park at the commuter lot that's nearby on Coda Street. Well, guess what? That's the police station. So the bridge to this new reality that we are supposed to be mobilizing on doesn't really exist yet. And so we're kind of stepping our foot out into the void because we have to, and because it actually does make sense, but the infrastructure to get from point A to B, aside from Uber and Lyft, which were not mentioned, weren't there. And so we're in a transitional phase, and the bridge is still under construction.
Yeah.
The other thing that Barry raised, and I think he should probably come back on this, he was saying, well, so we have a covenant in the lease that says, thou shalt not own a car. And the city said, oh, we can't do that, we can't do that. And landlords can't enforce whether or not you have a car. Why have them do something that we can't really, enforce? Well, he had said, in subsequent conversations, he said, well, landlords have covenants saying tenants can't have pets. There's lots of rules and regulations that landlords impose on their tenants based on the property at hand. And so I think the council didn't want to go there. And I don't know if there's really a reason you can't do it, or they just didn't want to do it. But it does beg the question, how are we supposed to get around into our car-free future when we don't have MTD ain't delivering the goods right now?
Yeah, Josh, I mean, two things. One is, it sounds like the housing crisis is now, the so-called housing crisis is now going to generate a parking crisis for starters. Of all the people who live around there. And then, this is a precedent-setting thing, right? Barry sort of cast it in, kind of grand historical, we're losing the culture of Santa Barbara. I've lived here for 70 years or whatever. Is he right? I found myself astonishingly agreeing with Barry Cappello in his comments on this. This is really, this is the start of the end of Santa Barbara as it's been, right?
Well, that was Barry Cappello's point. He said when he was city attorney in the 70s, the council actively guarded against the canyonization of the city. They had concerns about water use, traffic, neighborhood congestion, sewage hookups. And yes, he acknowledged that has led to the housing situation we're in now. But what it also did was we don't have to knock buildings down. We don't have these whole community full of tall buildings. And he looked at the city planners. This was what was remarkable. And he looked at them and he pointed. It was a classic closing arguments. And he said, you people, you young people, you don't understand. You can't see the future. And I'm paraphrasing. I've been around. I've been around. And so he personalized it. And that was what kind of upset Kristen Sneddon. It is the first project. There are others in the pipeline, though, without parking because of this state law, the state mandate. They're expecting people to park in city lots because it is downtown and near city parking lots, or kind of find a private space to rent a car. Barry Cappello, this was the moment for me. He said, are we kidding ourselves? Are we joking? And he used the word I had to look up. He said, is this pure sophistry? Please, on this idea that people aren't going to have cars. It's a little bit of a generational battle. So you've got people recently out of the university who didn't have cars, with people who have had families, who've had people where you have to go get things and you got to take kids places to after school, pick them up, youth sports, you got to buy groceries. When you're integrated in the community, the car is not the enemy of the environment. The car is an essential liberator. It equalizes things. We just don't want people with super wealthy to have cars to be able to get around. Everybody needs a car, and not because they hate the environment, because it represents your freedom to be independent.
And so it's your God-given right as a Californian.
It's a big cultural shift, and I mean, the canyonization is a very dramatic manifestation of it. And the council said, hey, Ed St. George gave us everything we asked for, and he is painting inside the lines, and we don't have any grounds to say no. There's the state laws that promote housing and discourage local governments from limiting it, and there's the city's own rules where they created this super density overlay zone and said, this is where we want so much housing, we're not going to require any parking. So guess what? Ed St. George didn't provide any parking, and we can't deny it for that. It is a big cultural shift from where the city was when Barry was city attorney, and then there was a serious consideration given to living within your resources, and that was sort of the mantra.
What an idea.
And I think that there is a reality to those resource constraints, which is not acknowledged by the just built housing in any density. I mean, there are water constraints, there are sewage constraints, there are road constraints, but there's also a change in habits. There are more people that I know who don't have cars. They manage. There are more, it's harder. If you have a family, it's admittedly really hard. And obviously, if you have to drive to Ventura to work, you need a car. But there are a lot of people who are getting by without them. And the Uber, if you do the math, as expensive as it is to do Uber, it's still a lot cheaper than paying the monthly car payments, the insurance, the repairs, the registration, etc., and gas.
But it doesn't get around the fundamental problem, which is, this state-driven, quote unquote, housing crisis, which Mayor Randy Rouse last week pointed out has been, before the council since the 1930s, according to Sheila Lodge's book, is packing more people in, more density. And the resource, I mean, the resource question hasn't gone away. That's still a real thing. I mean, why doesn't somebody, and I wonder if Barry is the guy to do it, sue the state over this, taking away all the local control. He indicated there might be an appeal. Is there any chance he would do that? Both of you?
Well, sorry, Nick, you can go ahead, but he ended his thing with, are we going to sue? I don't know. Can we sue? Well, I can tell you there's grounds for a lawsuit. So he left it sort of vague. Barry Cappello is the kind of guy who could take on, the oil industry. He could take on the state of California and get lots of attention doing it. I don't know if he is going to. And I want to just piggyback on what you said. From my perspective, the issue to me is the fact that there's a duplicity going on in the conversation about housing. You will hear the housing activists say, we need more housing, housing, housing. Yes, we do, in my opinion. But this market rate housing is outrageously expensive. So the people they point to who say, we need housing for the workers, the service industry, the working families, they're not the ones benefiting from the housing.
Well,
the ones who can pay $5,000 for a 2-bedroom, and they're the ones benefiting from the housing. And then they'll say, oh, well, it's a escalator. Those people will move out of their homes and into these, and then the other people can move into those. And so it gets into all these philosophical debates. Last thing, Kristen Sneddon sided with Barry Cappello against this housing project.
Well, she's the closest thing we have to a, sort of a throwback preservationist.
But she was also the one, I mean, and Barry did, it's like, he was a little too personal, there's no doubt. I mean,
gee, what a shock.
He was calling
Are
him
you
zealous.
lying now, Mr. Roberts? Yeah.
I mean, he was calling him zealous. And you don't care because you're young and none of this matters to you.
Well, and he called them ladies. I guess that didn't go over so well.
No, it does not go over.
He was being courtly, but courtly you can't do anymore. It's like it's so over. All right, we gotta talk about something. Oh, so Nick, what do you think? You think there's a suit there, a case there against the state, real quick, for seizing and damaging local control?
All I can tell you is I asked Barry afterwards, and I haven't heard back yet whether he's going to do it. I think he has to consult with his client, who has, from the looks of him, it sounds like he has the deepest pockets in the world and could bankroll such a lawsuit. And from people, at the county government, I hear them privately saying, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that has not been litigated, that could be litigated. And the legal basis for a lot of the state requirements are murky. So,
yeah, somebody's going to do it. I know somebody's going to do it. And for those keeping score at home, sophistry, by the way, is specious reasoning or fallacious argument. The other thing, real quick, just on Barry, just a footnote. He of course is the one who represented the people who brought us district elections. And I think district elections is partly responsible for this shift in policy away from people who sort of elected officials who looked at, what's best for the whole city versus what's best for my constituents. But all right, I don't mean to sound like an old crank. I know I can't help it, but I do. All right, Nick, last Friday, it's always, we all know, if you don't want anybody to pay attention in the news, do it late on a Friday. But it appears that Sansum Clinic Healthcare has been sold, even though everybody else tried to fuzzy it up with, they've reached an agreement for a partnership. Blah, blah, blah. They're getting sold. They're getting taken over, right?
It hasn't happened yet, but it's going to happen. They are now celebrating their 100th year in existence, and they have been struggling a lot for the last 15 years at least, just to stay afloat. And they announced last Friday that Sutter Healthcare, which is this large enterprise out of Northern California with, I think, 23 or 24 acute care hospitals. I mean, that's how big they are.
Yeah, no, they're big.
They have 52,000 workers. I mean, doctors, nurses, everything. That is the sort of scale of the operations. They're like a $14 billion a year enterprise. And, Kurt Ranselhoff, who I spoke to last Friday afternoon, he's the head of Sansum. He said, they will be the owner. He said,
they Sutter
will own it. They will be the owner. He was not putting any fuzzy on it. He was being very clear, even though the press release said, we're entering into exclusive partnership agreement.
Right. That's like the elephant and the mouse entering into an exclusive partnership. Who's going to win that battle?
And the real question is what kind of changes does Sutter Healthcare require? And some of the speculation I'm hearing is from people in the medical community is they are not in the business of losing money. They are in the business of getting every last drop of whatever they can out of their medical professionals, and the doctors are going to be pushed in a way that the doctors at Sansum have not been pushed. Kurt Ramshoff himself
Pushed in terms of like workload.
Workload. Kurt Ramshoff is a primary care doctor. He still sees patients. He's the administrator of, he's the CEO of this place. And he has a reputation there of being like, you know how they talk about a player's coach?
Yeah,
Well, he's sort of
doctor.
a doctor's administrator. And Sutter at some point, you know, who knows how long Kurt will be around, and I would imagine he will stay for some time. But I think Sutter is going to be pushing for greater productivity, and so they can charge more. And the doctors are going to feel that probably most acutely. But in the meantime, you have UCLA, which has moved here, which is a big chain, and it is, I don't know how many offices it has, but it has a significant one with its oncology office. And that's a big moneymaker that they took away from Sansum. Or, you know,
they took it away from the cancer center.
I mean, Sansum still has it, but they're fighting for the money in a way they hadn't before. And now you have Sutter. So you have.
You know, I think we would have been better off if the government let Cottage and Sansum merge. I mean, of course, you know, I'm here opposing change once again, but I'll bet you anything it's going to take longer to get an appointment. It's going to be more cursory. You're going to get your 15 minutes, and they're going to be in and out of there. And
well, I think you'll probably able to get your appointment quicker.
You do.
One of the things that Ramshoff said that the optimism, at least, is that they will be able to, he didn't say this, but presumably they will be paying higher rates than Sansum currently pays. Sansum is not at the high end of the pay spectrum, and Sutter's reportedly is higher than Sansum.
Well,
they also have lots of residents that, you know.
Yeah, great.
And so they will kind of go through their residency and, oh, now would you like to go work in Santa Barbara? The real problem, though, is going back to what we were talking about before. Maybe they'll live in those 19 units with no car. Yeah,
where are they going to live? Exactly. Well, I just as a personal note, I was in a Sutter hospital up north when I got sick the last time, and it was pretty good. I mean, it really was. I mean, it was great. Staff was great. Everything. So that's just for what that's worth. All right, Josh. We had this controversy over the Hot Springs Trail we've been talking about for a while, off and on. And Dos Williams has been trying to push through something that the neighbors don't like. And the neighbors, oddly enough, are represented by Barry Cappello's law firm. And Dos took it in the shorts last week. Break that one down for us.
So there's been a year-long litigation battle, and there's a lot of popularity with the Hot Springs Trail that erupted during the COVID-19 pandemic. There was a social media post, it went viral, lots of Europeans, people coming to these hot springs. So people don't know where to park. There's only 8 parking spaces there. So what has happened is these individuals are parking anywhere they can in Montecito so they can get as close to the trailhead as possible. What does that mean? They're parking in public right-of-way, partially private property, in front of people's mansions, in front of people's homes. The neighbors started to put boulders and plantings and other obstructions to sort of prevent people from parking there. And this is without a permit. They just sort of did this. So the county goes in there and sends them all these letters and says, you have to remove these, otherwise you're going to be prosecuted. This is an obstruction. This is a public right-of-way. You're not allowed to use this for your private purposes. And at the same time, they have a plan to create parking spaces at the Hot Springs Trail. There's some debate. Dos Williams and I argued over this through text message because I used the 26 number that the neighbors have said. He said it's going to be far fewer than that.
26 spaces that the county wants.
The county has said that they want 26 parking spaces, and they're going to create an area to have that near the hot springs. Doss Williams says that number was just thrown out. It's not a real number. It's just like the worst case, the highest most, but it won't be that.
Well, wasn't
And
the
so
number 62 used at one point by the public works director? I think he retreated from it, but once the cat was out of the bag, everybody freaked out. 62 parking spaces, and I think that was really where the fuse was lit.
Well, but
so
anyway,
the ruling was that there was this litigation to, hey, county, you can't do this. You need to do an environmental review because you're actually disrupting all of this. What about the cumulative impacts of parking in the area? And so it went to court, and Judge Tom Anderley ruled in favor of the nearby homeowners against the county, against Doss Williams, who was very upset. And he kind of framed it in the story as, why do we need to do an environmental review to stop neighbors from putting obstructions in the roadway? And that was his perspective, but that wasn't really the debate. The debate was the county needs to do an environmental review if they're going to have this Hot Springs parking project, which is going to be disruptive. So the county's very upset, very mad. They're surprised. They don't like this. These homeowners, represented by Cappello and his attorney, David Cousineau, they did a great job on this and arguing this on behalf of them. And so the county loses, and these homeowners are going to force them to do EIR.
yeah, and you know what struck me? Of course, Doss thinks he's always smarter than everyone, and his arrogance knows no bounds. But I thought his comments were, it was kind of personal, aimed at the judge, and just kind of over the line for a public official to be talking about a court ruling. It was, dare I say, almost Trump-like.
All right, Jerry, just bring it down a little bit.
What did he do? But Josh, don't. I mean, it wasn't.
His comment was very condescending toward Judge Tom Anderley, who's got an incredible reputation. It seemed to suggest that he felt he knew CEQA better than Tom Anderley does. And so Doss does have environmental credentials. He does have a perspective on that, but it did seem dismissive of Anderley's ruling. It wasn't, well, this is the ruling and now we're going to regroup and figure out a way. It wasn't like that. It was always like, this is wrong. We don't need it, So yeah, I think that's what people are picking up on. It's a very complicated battle. Doss will frame it as rich Montecito people who are trying
who happen to be his constituents, but
yes, well, in this context, he'll frame it as rich Montecito people trying to stop the everyday Santa Barbara person from going on a hike.
Yes, of course, he's more moral than anyone. That's why.
That's the way he's framing it. But the truth of the matter is, I've been on that hike, and there's a lot of people who are not from Santa Barbara. In fact, most of them are not, that I've been on a couple times. They're tourists, they're traveling in, and they don't know, they're just finding a place to park. And so that's part of what's going on.
All right,
Anderley, if any judge on that bench knows environmental law, Anderley does. I mean, that is, to the extent anybody, that's their bread and butter. He is the environmental judge, and he has a history of rulings that tend to lean in favor of environmental review when whenever the power be doesn't want it, Anderley is more likely to rule it's necessary.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got to get out, but real quick, just give me a quick take on a couple of things. This change at the Santa Barbara Unified School District about the reading program, Josh, what's the significance of that?
Well, yeah, there's a lot going on at the school district. They've changed the curriculum. We've talked about that on the show in terms of how students are taught to read. And so this was the work of a lot of activists over the years. And finally, they're going to try to change the curriculum. At the same time, the school district is facing this onslaught of teachers who are protesting. They want higher salaries. And so there's a lot of energy going on at these board meetings right now, as Sherry Ray articulated in her fine column.
Yeah, no, it was a good, I thought she really, because she's such a, advocate for the change in the reading program, and for her to say, slow it down. We got to take care of the teachers, I thought was kind of very telling about where we are.
Wow.
And how to, how we're going to sort of, balance those two things. Nick, the police department is down a number of officers. And I guess they've made a shift now in how they're going to recruit. They're going to try to build partnership with City College and just recruit locally. What is that about?
Well, that's been in the works for a while. I know that Barry Cappello, the former interim chief, had been trying to create connections with City College and using that as a recruiting tool or place. And the new chief, Gordon, is definitely following up on that. And it's an obvious place. Why aren't we doing that?
Yeah, and why haven't we done it before? And then out at City College, we got, I guess, what is this, the 28th president in the last 4 years or something, Josh? I mean, that whole, we've talked about it before, the whole hiring thing was murky, but I guess we've got someone who looks pretty solid and actually worked at City College before, huh?
Yeah, Dr. Erica Androhonas, I believe her name is. I've not met her. She's been appointed, and she was part of the original pool, and then they decided to wait. She's formally there. She is well liked at the school. Hopefully she'll bring some stability and we can have some long-term vision for the college. Obviously, there was a lot of activism on the part of the faculty senate for several years there, and it made it very difficult for a lot of for the superintendent to last. And I'm not saying that's like a bad thing at all. Sometimes they made some bad hires and they had to put pressure on people to leave. But regardless of that, hopefully now it'll be a little more stable and we can return to a long-term vision. Enrollment is down at City College. It's nothing like it was before the pandemic, just that feel being around in terms of students. So City College is this incredible institution. Hopefully we can start acting like that again and having it be the prestigious college it once was.
All right. And then Nick, I think the big question hanging out there in the community about local news is, when is your Chubby Checker piece going to appear?
Chubby Checker, that would be the cover story next week.
Oh man,
Yeah.
We can't wait. We can't wait. We got to see that exclusive interview with Chubby Checker, who most of us thought was dead.
81 years old, going on 30.
Is
Yeah.
Fats Domino still around? No.
No, I
I
think
don't think so, but
I think Fats is best, but the great, really an icon for the generation that doesn't think there's a housing crisis. Oh, not to mix those things all up. Josh, who you got on a podcast? Oh, you got some guy that's like taking psychedelics and stuff, huh?
Oh yeah, I did a podcast with Jacob Tell, who has a new social group called District 216, and he talks about the 4 pillars: art, music, cannabis, and psychedelics. Jacob Tell was the originator of the Lagoon Zone, the controversial name for the Laguna district, and he's a entrepreneur. I think he calls himself chief creator. So anyway, he talks about his trips on psychedelics on this podcast. Essentially me trying to, grow my audience by trying to tap into that tech crowd. So,
Clickbait. Yeah, I got
I think
you.
I better stick with housing though.
I got you. All right. And most important of all, we wonder if Anthony Davis is going to play tonight, so the Lakers can open a can of whoop ass on the Warriors. But what do we think, Nick? Is it going to go 7 games, or you think the Lakers take it in 6?
I have no idea.
Josh, what do you?
I do know Steph Curry sent a letter protesting a housing development near his home because he said this was part of the housing. He said that it would be unsafe for his kids because the height of the towers, people would be able to see into his backyard. I lost all respect for him after that.
I never had any.
Obviously, the Lakers are going to win, Jerry.
I hope
so. It doesn't matter whether it's 6 or 7.
I hope so. All right. Go Lakers. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Josh. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Newsmakers.